recording. For those of you who don't know, we record all these meetings and they're available on DLCD's YouTube site if you ever want to watch again and get a recap of meetings, or if you miss something, that's a good way to get caught up. But first things first, hi there. I'm Deb Myhoff. I'm a facilitator on contract with DLCD. And for those of you new to the process, I've been working with the team over the last year on facilitation of their technical advisory committee for the needed housing and helping the team on some of the other bits with rulemaking. So excited to be here kicking off the brand new Housing Actions Work Group. And there are about I think there's 28 on the roster. You should have received that in your or seen that in your packet. And 8 of you have not been involved with any other technical advisory committees or the rulemaking advisory committee. So we'll be getting everyone sort of on the same page, starting with today. And then I will be following up with each of you individually over the next month, just to kind of check in and answer questions. So this is all a warning to say this is going to be a lot of information coming at you this morning. Just trying to get us all grounded and have the same framing. And then the rest of the meetings, as is typical of this sort of group, we'll be hearing more from you back. So apologies for the information out, but hopefully we can get it out of the way and then move on. But I will be following up one-on-one if you have questions or concerns you'd like to talk about. So this morning, that information out, we'll be doing introductions of everyone in a little bit. We'll also get you sort of framed out on the racial equity framework. We'll get you framed out on the statutory overview and where we are. And then the specifics of this work group, sort of the work plan and scope and deliverables that we expect to produce in very short time. With your help. And then we'll have a little bit of a moment toward the end, the last quarter of the meeting or so. We can touch base on some content related items, which are the policy objectives for the work around safe harbors and minimum standards. So that is what we're up to today. And before we get into introductions, I'm going to invite Thea to give us an overview of the racial equity framework. For those of you unfamiliar with this process, every meeting will have some element of, or maybe many elements of the racial equity framework we'll touch on just to make sure we are in the right headspace for these conversations. So Thea, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Deb. And I'll wait till Maddie can scooch over to that screen. Maddie, are you on show? It's really great to be in this room with you all. This has been a bit of a, I don't know, it feels like a long time coming, even though it's a short time coming. And so it's really exciting to get this moving with you all. I do want to talk about the racial equity framework for decision making for just a minute. This is a tool that the Multicultural Collaborative developed at the request of LCDC, the Land Conservation and Development Commission, for the owner rulemaking specifically, and not for the owner rulemaking specifically, for all DLCD rulemaking. The owner rulemaking is sort of the first major DLCD rulemaking to implement the framework and to really build it into our process. So most of you in the room are familiar with this element of the program. For those of you that aren't, the framework presents a series of questions in the 8 areas, those that you see on the screen here. And these help to ground policy decisions to ensure that our efforts are both mitigating harms of the past and integrating and building principles of equity into the rule language as we move forward. So one way that we put that framework into practice with our advisory committees, and so with the HOG right now, is to begin, as Deb said, begin each meeting with a reflection on what questions and elements of the framework are especially salient in the discussion of the day. So today we really want to keep the entirety of the framework in mind as we discuss the full shape of the work ahead. between now and the next meeting, I really encourage each of you to spend some time sitting with the questions that are in the framework, which was in your packet in full, and draw connections, and then come into the work in the next meeting with that perspective. On the staff side, we're going to be doing the same, and we revisit those questions often. And I really want to empower all of you to call us in if you see the rule or process sort of taking a turn from the principles that are outlined in the framework, and just continue to think creatively about how we engage this really critical perspective in the role that we are building. So I'll pass it back to you, Deb, to move on to the next thing.
Great, thank you. So we are going to take a bit of time just to do introductions. I'll start by introducing the team at the state, DLCD, and some of our other colleagues in the room, and then I'll turn it over and I'll line you out for the rest of you to introduce yourselves. And we have a little bit of an icebreaker question, hopefully an easy one. But before we do that, let me remind everyone about how we run these Zooms, because I realize I probably should have done that at the top. So with a large group like this, the easiest for all of us when we get to discussion items or questions and answers is to use the raise hand function. If you are having a hard time getting to the raise hand function, which happens sometimes, just sort of wave your hand and someone will help me, or I can kind of see you. Also, the recording, you may or may not know, only shows people who are on camera. So especially when you're talking, it's helpful to be on camera. I realize not everyone can do that all the time, but otherwise it's just a voice and you don't quite know who it is if you're watching on video. So the rest of it's all pretty straightforward. The chat is open for Ingrid Cadell to help us with technical issues. So if you're having some sort of connection issue or any other issue, chat to Ingrid and she will help. She'll give you a hand. Or if you have some other functional issues, let her know and she can be in touch with us as well. But otherwise, we like to have all of the conversations in the room. And then lastly, we anticipate, we'll talk about this as we go along, but we anticipate over the next few months working together, since it is such a large group, we'll use other tools and mechanisms to get feedback. We won't always be a group of 28 trying to speak at once in a very short period of time. So we might do breakout rooms, we might do polling or surveys before or after or during meetings. We'll think some other, we might do some, I don't know, mural board work or something where we can collaborate a little bit better as though we were in the room together physically. So just a little layout on how we're going to run the meetings. Any questions about Zoom functions, how we run meetings? Some of you are old hat at this and could lay us out. Okay, cool. Well, let's keep it rolling then. So I'm going to start with the DLCD team. Please introduce yourself, obviously your position, and then just sort of what your role generally with this work is. And I will start with Mari.
Thank you, Deb, and good morning, everyone. My name is Mari Valencia Aguilar. I use she or they pronouns, and I'm a housing planner with the department. It is good to see a lot of familiar faces and good to see new faces. Appreciate you all being here and being part of the Housing Actions Work Group and your partnership and commitment to this work. I am one of 4 of the lead staff on the Housing Actions Work Group for the work ahead. So excited to be here and to work with you all on the work ahead. With that, I will pass it over to Thea, who is next on my screen.
Hey everybody, just to introduce myself, Thea Croman. I'm a housing planner with DLCD. And along with Mari and 2 other colleagues leading this work in the HOG. And I'll pass it to Sean.
Hi, folks. My name is Sean Edging, he, him pronouns. I am a planner with the new Housing Accountability and Production Office, the new joint office that was part of Senate Bill 1537 between Building Codes Division and DLCD. My nexus to this work, as we'll kind of talk about as we get into the overview of the orientation, is on model codes, right? Where there's a nexus between both the housing team side of things and ONA implementation, as well as HAPO. And I'll pass it over to Celestina.
Thanks, Sean. Good morning, everybody. Celestina Teva, she and they pronouns, housing planner, and I can be number 4 of 4 for this 4-person lead team. As Sean mentioned, he's our sub-lead to the model codes work. And so I and Mari and Thea will be focusing a little bit more on adoption-ready actions and compliance pathways and developing that part of our scope. With that, I will pass to Ethan.
Thanks, Celestina. Hi, everyone. My name is Ethan Stuckmeyer, manage the housing division at DLCD. Glad that we can be all here together today. Deb, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So a couple of other folks at DLCD with us. I mentioned Ingrid. Ingrid, would you introduce yourself?
Morning, everyone. Ingrid Cordell. I am admin support for the housing division at DLCD. I can help you with meeting invites and support during the meeting. I could pass it on to Kirsten.
Great.
Good morning, everyone. Great to see you. Kirsten Green. I serve as DLCD's Deputy Director and also Tribal Liaison at Director's Delegation. I wanted to just underscore our gratitude for your service and for bringing your hearts and minds and experience and expertise and curiosity as this very capable team, hardworking team, helps guide us towards the best solutions for all Oregonians. And also to thank Vice Chair Lazo for being the commission liaison to this work. I hope we can hear from him as we roll past DLCD's introductions to the rest of the team. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsten. And a couple of other colleagues in the housing group. Cotton, are you there? I know you're not feeling well today, but you're there. Yes.
All right. I think I'm having problems with my video. Sorry about that, you all. I'm a little under the weather today, but good morning. Karen Guillen Chapman, she, her pronouns. I serve as UGB specialist in a team of 3, focused on urbanization work within the housing division. And we are here to maintain that coordination and connection to the work around capacity and urbanization as you all work through the body of work that you have ahead of you. Deb, should I hand it over to another member of urbanization team?
Yeah, Jenna would be great.
Yeah, hi everyone. Jenna Hughes, she, her pronouns. I'm a housing and growth management analyst with DLCD, and I'm one of the 3 members that Cotton mentioned who are supporting the Capacity and Urbanization Technical Advisory Committee. So you might see us pop in and out of meetings, especially for topics that are especially linked to that work. And I also want to note that we have, I don't think I see Madeline Phillips in the room, but she is another member of the urbanization team working on that portion of the rulemaking as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. I think Madeline won't be here today, but I appreciate you calling her out. Let's see, my colleague, Madeline, a different Madeline.
Hi, everyone. My name is Madeline Miller. I'm a senior project manager here at Echo Northwest. We're the lead consultant on the ONA rulemaking efforts. So I will be staffing this work group with Deb and can be available for any other questions on other pieces, on the many other pieces. Nice to see you all.
Thank you so much. So as you can tell, lots of firepower among the team and definitely among the committee. So let's get started with introductions or the work group of you all. And if you could, of course, give us your name, any affiliation you have, and then also icebreaker question for you. hopefully not too challenging. What is a bright spot in the housing market you're seeing that you're looking forward to see play out some more? So trying to think positive thoughts about the housing market, and anything you'd like to share. I would like to invite, and I'll call on you so we can make sure we get everyone. I'd like to invite Alan Lazo, our LCDC liaison and housing expert, to kick us off. And Alan, you're welcome to say anything else you'd like as well.
Thanks, Deb. And my gosh, what a joy it is to be with this all-star team this morning. This is fantastic. I didn't expect that. So I'm Alan Lazo. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the current vice chair of the Land Conservation and Development Commission and the former executive director at the Fair Housing Council of Oregon. So in addition to serving as the LCDC liaison, I've been doing some work also as helping out with some of the fair housing subject matter as we've moved through the first part of this work, and recognizing that the commission just passed the rules and got us, we're all now over that first very big push up the hill, but also recognize that there is a great deal of work and very important work in front of us in this group. So really, really looking forward to that. And to me, that's the bright spot about the housing market and the housing work that's being done right now, is the forward momentum that we have in working towards, as I said in the recent commission meeting, really putting in place and in practice the ideals that I think that we share as a state in every community in creating more equitable housing outcomes. So really looking forward to this work and appreciate being here with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. We're really excited to be continuing to work with you on this. Really great to have you here. So I am going to call on you folks, and I'm going to start actually reverse order from the alphabet, but I am going to make it alphabetical so I don't miss anyone. So I'm going to start with Tom Cody. Hi, Tom.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Tom. He, him pronouns. I am a real estate developer. I've been basically working in Oregon my whole career, whole professional career, but my background's in urban planning. I care deeply about housing and like being involved in innovative housing solutions. We're building a large-scale modular project in Bend, for instance, and just always exploring new ways to try to solve our deep housing deficit, and really happy to be here and appreciate the work everyone's doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. Glad to have you here. And Talia.
Hi, I'm Talia Concrevis. Glad to be here. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Assistant Director of Homeownership Programs at Oregon Housing and Community Services. And a bright spot that we're seeing over at OHCS is that we were able to recently change how one of our homeownership development funding sources is structured. And due to that, we've received more inquiries from rural developers than we ever have before. So we're really excited to be able to reach rural communities with our funding for homeownership development over the next years to come.
Really great. Thank you so much. Shannon, hi, good morning.
Deb?
Yes.
Sorry, my bright spot is distress in the multifamily market is leading to lower rents and buying opportunities. And so it's horrible for people that own the buildings, but if there is a silver lining, it's, that hopefully it eases things a little bit.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for circling back to that. I just wasn't sure if you were trying to avoid thinking about bright spots. Appreciate that. Sorry, Shannon, go ahead.
All good. Good morning, Shannon Billhauer. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity of Oregon. And I think that the bright spot I want to bring into the space is increased interest in private-public partnerships to deliver affordable home ownership. I can think of two concrete instances. One is the Bend and Lapine School District, interested in working with Habitat for Humanity and others locally to generate housing for their current workforce, such as teachers and support staff for the schools. and then the hospital located over in Lincoln City, Oregon. A hospital administrator essentially figuring out a way to contribute her backyard to Habitat for Humanity to provide affordable homeownership opportunities for essential hospital staff. Thanks.
Thanks. Samuel, you're up next.
Samuel Goldberg, he, him pronouns. I'm the policy manager for Housing Council of Oregon. Bright spot for me is that the first two middle housing units just opened in my neighborhood. I think they'll be occupied soon. And importantly, they are both quadplexes, meaning that they have accessible units built into them. So that was a very exciting thing to see.
It is exciting. And Rachel, glad you're back.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Rachel Mori Bidu. I use she, her pronouns, and work for Network for Oregon Affordable Housing. We are a not-for-profit affordable housing lender that works solely in Oregon. And I am the Director of Policy and Asset Management. And I think a bright spot that I've been enjoying watching the progression of development through time is that I think we're at a point where people and like the public-private partnership, like Shannon was talking about, is more open to creativity, different types of housing development, preservation, and even different types of rent restrictions.
Those are bright spots, and I'm seeing some nodding heads on that too. Thank you. Olivia. Is Olivia's here, yes? Yeah. All right, Olivia, I'm going to circle back to you. Is Nir here? All right, I'll come back to Nir as well. How about Michael? Hi, Michael.
Hi, Michael Anderson, him or them. I'm with Sightline Institute. We're a sustainability think tank. Think people should be able to live closer to each other if they want to, because they can save energy when they do that. And a bright spot is that I just was looking at Portland's middle housing production numbers for 2023, and they are for the after period from implementation of the middle housing law. It is up about 3 times, both in absolute numbers and in a share of total production. And like Sam said, a lot of those are accessible, and they're relatively cheap compared to the homes that would have been built otherwise. So that's great.
Right on. Thank you for bringing that forward. And how about Matt Saris?
Yeah, good morning. My name's Matt Sears. I'm the Public Policy Director with the Oregon Council for Developmental Disabilities. I use he, him pronouns. And I think a bright spot for me would be that there's been more public discourse on the lack of accessible housing than I've seen in a long time. And I appreciate that. And I hope we can do something about it here in this work group.
Yeah, great. Thank you. We're hoping that too. Mary Kyle.
Good morning, Mary Kyle McCurdy, Associate Director with 1000 Friends of Oregon. I use she, her pronouns. And I think the bright spot is some of what we've already heard, the ways to expand the financial pie for both affordable rental and home ownership through things like public-private partnerships, social housing, etc. I like those discussions of ways to think bigger.
Thank you. And Mac.
Hi there, my name is Mac Cunningham. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a housing developer at Community Partners for Affordable Housing. I have 2 things that are making me excited today. The first is admittedly a little self-congratulatory, but tomorrow I am due to close on 63 units of affordable housing in the city of Tigard, over half of which will be family-size units. Those are 2, 3, and 4-bedroom units. Very excited about that. And the second piece is I am really excited about sort of this a movement that's kind of been growing around the country related to building code reform and more specifically single stair reform. So that way we can build more multifamily units that are both have greater livability, can have more family size units, and also can be designed to be more culturally responsive. And thank you.
Thanks, Matt, and congratulations. Kathy Wild, please.
Excuse me, still having breakfast. Kathy Wild, she, her pronouns. I have spent 40 years as a civil rights attorney, doing a lot of housing discrimination cases over that time. Most recently, legal director of Disability Rights Oregon. And I guess the thing that I find exciting is that people are finally starting to talk about developing additional requirements for accessibility. And I've got a team here on this call, Sam Goldberg, Matt Sears, and Alan Hines, who are going to make sure that we don't forget to keep pushing for accessibility.
Indeed, and great to have your voice in that space as well. Thank you, Kathy. Karen.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Burig. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the long-range planning manager at Clackamas County in our planning and zoning division. And so I think the bright spot for me is actually our growing partnership with our housing authority and all of the work that they are doing. They are the ones that are really locally kind of on the ground and supporting and being involved in the actual development of affordable housing in Clackamas County. So it's been really good to see our partnership between our planning and zoning group and that particular team at Clackamas County.
That's great. Thank you, Karen. Hi, Julia.
Morning. Julia Metz, she, her pronouns. I work in collaboration with both Sightline and Thousand Friends of Oregon with a group of coalition partners on the ONA rulemaking process and now moving into this phase. Glad to be part of this group and excited to be moving into this stage of the work. Mine is kind of similar to Sam's, that I've just been really excited in my neighborhood. So kind of on the ground, seeing more infill and kind of middle housing developments, as well as just like a variety of different housing types being built in the last like couple of years. And so it's just exciting to see that diversity of housing and hoping that we can make that easier to happen across the entire state soon. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Julia. And Josh. Good morning.
Morning. Hey, everybody. I'm Josh LeBombard. I'm the Southern Oregon Regional Rep for DLCD. I'm also the lead regional rep of the department. There's, as many of you know, there's 9 of us around the state. I think the bright spot for me is seeing a lot of the redevelopment happen after the Almeda fire burned through Southern Oregon. The development's a lot denser, and a lot of that is not just apartments, but a lot of it's middle housing and ADU. So a lot of that's been helped or facilitated by the grant work that we've been doing in communities, especially in the last 5 or 6 years.
That's great. Thank you. And Gust, hi.
Good morning. Thanks for the great conversation already. It's wonderful to see so much interest in trying to put all these great ideas in motion. So my name is Gus Chachis. I'm over in La Grande, Oregon. I'm a rural housing developer for affordable and market rate. I guess the bright spot for me would be that it seems like in a lot of the rural communities that we're working in, there's been a substantial and very noticeable shift in a willingness to consider development. And that sounds a little bit odd because why wouldn't we? But oddly, it's not something that I think a lot of rural communities are super interested in. So it's exciting to see that shift in the planners and just a willingness to consider these unique and a little bit more outside the box partnerships like have been mentioned already. So good morning, thanks.
Good morning. Glad you're here. Thank you, Gust. Hi, Griffin Gilbert, please.
Hey everyone, Griffin Gilbert, he, him. I am a senior project manager with Rooted Homes, based in Bend. We do work kind of all throughout Central Oregon. Super excited to be part of this group and collaborate with everyone here. I'd say that the thing that I'm excited about recently is just a lot of great collaboration with different cities or different partners, or just working with a lot of exciting people that, it feels like as we get more people together on these projects, the more we can do and the more effective and efficient it is. So a lot of great collaboration happening.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. Garland, good morning. I thought I saw you there, Garland.
Hey.
Oh, there you are.
Hi, folks. Good morning. I'm out riding my bicycle on this sunny day. Just listening in. This is Garland Woodsong. I'm the Exec Director of Place Initiative. We're a national nonprofit focused on elevating urbanism as a climate strategy for equitable outcomes. I'm also President and Chair of the Oregon Cooperative Housing Network and Managing Director of Woodsong Associates, which is an urban planning consultancy. 3 bright spots I'd like to mention this morning. Also, I use he, him pronouns. The first is Square One Villages, the largest developer of housing cooperatives on the West Coast of the United States, which is cranking out new resident-owned homes in the Eugene-Springfield area and actively seeking collaboration with folks wanting to develop housing co-ops in the Portland metro area and other parts of the state. Second is Frolic, which is pioneering a new model of cooperative housing development in the Seattle metro area. They're looking to expand next to California, but then after that to Oregon, and their model, I think, is a really good one for preventing gentrification and displacement by allowing people to buy into their communities and turn single-family homes into middle housing developments. And then finally, shout out to Albina Vision Trust, which is buying my building, the Paramount, from a privately owned developer, and is very interested in turning it into a housing cooperative. Thanks.
Thanks, Garland, and thanks for joining us on your gorgeous morning ride. Daisy, please.
Good morning, everyone. Daisy Quinones, she, her pronouns. I'm a senior housing policy analyst in the housing department at Metro Regional Government. Excited to see some new faces and some familiar ones here in this group today. A bright spot I'm seeing in the housing market, some of you all mentioned this already, but I'm seeing a lot of affordable home ownership opportunities that look like, infill housing, missing middle housing. So that's really exciting. And that's just, speaks to the work of many of you here. So it's a bright spot for me.
Indeed. Thank you for being here. Cassidy, good morning.
Good morning. Apologies, I'm having some issues with my camera today, so it's not turned on, but I'm Cassidy Bolger. I'm the Director of Development at Killian Pacific. We're a Portland Metro-based real estate owner and developer. I use he, him pronouns, and I think a bright spot, I'll be granular and say that I'm starting to see some relief in construction hard costs coming up on the horizon, which hopefully will help folks like me find a way to get new housing projects going in 2025, given that that's been hard to do the last couple of years.
Very much a bright spot. Glad you're here, Cassidy. Hi, Brock.
Hey, everyone. I'm Brock Nation. I'm the Policy Director at Oregon Realtors, he, him pronouns. I'm going to go with a little bit of a Tom Cody bright spot here. The downside, right, is that the state of housing in Oregon is not doing great, as shown by OHCS's State of the State's Housing Report. Putting that in the chat for Ingrid so that she can share the link to you all. But pulling a bright spot from that report, housing price growth has not continued to climb as fast as it was at the beginning of the pandemic. And that's a very good thing. Unfortunately, that was just about the only reassuring data point in that entire 50-page report. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to. But looking forward to continue working with this group to advance housing solutions in Oregon.
Great. Thanks so much, Brock. Brianne.
Thank you. Excuse me. I'm Brianne Gale. I'm a senior long-range planner at the City of Bend. I use she, her pronouns, and as far as bright spots go, I think here locally, we are expecting a lot of multi-unit development to come in line in the next year, more so than we've probably seen in the past. We just have a lot in the pipeline that'll finally come online. And so I think locally here, we're really excited about that.
That is really exciting. Thank you. Ariel, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Ariel Kane, economic planner with the City of Portland, project manager for our housing needs analysis and housing production strategy. Usually with an A name, I have the pleasure of having the first original idea. So at the risk of just saying ditto to everyone else's bright spots, coming out of the HPS, I guess I'm just really excited about the increased curiosity and innovation and solutions from sort of not the usual suspects in our community. And so I feel heartened about that going forward too.
Nice. Thanks, Ariel. Well, I hope you found it a relief to not be on the hot seat right at the beginning. Hi, good morning, Anne.
Yeah, thank you. Anne Catlin, City of Albany. I use she, her pronouns. I am the comprehensive planning manager for the city, which means I am the long-range planner, managing all this stuff. But several bright spots in Albany. We had a groundbreaking on our first tiny home village modeled after Square One Villages. That was late summer, early fall. We also did a groundbreaking on a new homeless veterans project, but we're adopting some changes to remove barriers to housing development, and we're well on our way to that. And something that is really needed in our market, in addition to middle housing, which we are seeing more applications for, is smaller footprint housing, empty nester, first time home buyer, and we just aren't seeing that built in the marketplace. And so we are, it's a little different than the cottages. But anyway, we're removing barriers to that. So those will also be accessible, providing more accessible, smaller footprint housing in Albany. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Congratulations on the new projects that came online too. That's great. Alexandra.
I am similarly not used to being on the tail end of the list. Alexandra Ring, League of Oregon Cities. I hold our housing and land use portfolio, so kind of the overlap of a number of different portions of this group. I will say I'm very excited to see kind of an increasing interest in affordable homeownership investments and just kind of more development of affordable homeownership for all. And then just kind of more on the the city side of thing, increasing investment in infrastructure. We know that's one of the top barriers to developing units, kind of when it comes to what cities need. So very excited to see that.
Great. Thank you, Alexandra. And we have a second Alan, just a heads up to you all, Alan Delatorre.
Hi there, Alan Delatorre, he, him pronouns, Northwest Pilot Project, where I work on advocacy and outreach. I'm also adjunct faculty at Portland State University in the Institute on Aging. A cautious bright spot. Don't think I've ever said this before, but I have some optimism around elected leadership. Everything from the governor's budget, which was very housing kind of friendly, to Representative Marsh working on senior housing innovation ideas at the state level, to our new electeds in Portland who are proactively leaning into housing conversations even before those councilor-elects are in office. So hopefully this leads to some positive housing-friendly outcomes.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for that sense of hopefulness too. So I need to circle around to a couple of folks. I want to point out in the chat, Ingrid put in Olivia's introduction. She's having some technical difficulties this morning, but went ahead and sent a written introduction. And then Nir, are you there and able to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Nir Perlson. I'm principal and owner of Aligned Architecture, a firm in Eugene. A few bright spots, actually a bunch of them. So we have been working with SOV, Square One Villages, for quite some years now. We're including on their new upcoming Rosa Village. Keep an eye for that one. They already completed Peace Village, Emerald Village. You may know about those. This led us to working with a group in Woodland called Woodland Opportunity Village. We're today or tomorrow submitting drawings for a little village with 12 units, 6 duplexes in Woodland. That leads me to another bright spot. Oregon is doing so much better than California. It's so sad to work with people over there. It's just, I mean, it's beautiful, but it's very expensive, and they don't have this amazing resource that we are now demonstrating with this Zoom call and so many other things. Another bright spot, Dev Northwest here in Eugene have a construction arm, which means no markups, in affordable, basically nonprofit construction arm. So simple, so amazing. Do more of that. And yes, Karin is going to be our next mayor, Karin Knudsen. Incredible, very inspiring, all about housing, planning, an architect. So yeah, great leadership. And I want to say one sad thing. I heard a lot of complaints and problems with how difficult and it's been to get money from the state, even though I know there's a lot of money that's been there for a few years. If we do anything with this group, hopefully we just make that start flowing. Thank you all.
Thanks for being here, Nir. Glad to get your perspectives. Okay, I know there's 2 people with the state that I've missed and I need to circle back for, Joel Madsen and Sveta as well. But go ahead, Joel. We'll start with you.
Thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Joel Madsen. I use he, him pronouns. And I have the pleasure of leading our Housing Accountability and Production Office at DLCD, an initiative that we are building our team at this point, and look forward to being a resource to our development community and our local jurisdictions to advance housing production, affordability, and choice around the state. Good to be here with you all.
Really glad you're here. Thanks, Joel. And Sveta, are you able to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Deb. Hi, everyone. Sweta, she, her pronouns. Apologies for being off camera. I'm in transit right now, but thanks for having me here. I'm the governor's senior housing advisor on the Housing and Homelessness Initiative team. So yeah, just thankful to be here and to be able to listen in.
Thank you, and apologies for mispronouncing your name. Good morning, all. Is there anyone else I missed? I think I got them all. Well, as you've heard, there are amazing skills in this group. I'm really hopeful for the work ahead and our ability to tackle it. And also the many bright spots, many of which I heard from you revolve around sort of innovation, creativity, openness to new ideas. And so I'm really excited to tap into that as well as the old standards of just getting some housing produced. So with that, let me look at my agenda and see where we're headed next. Statutory overview, Sean and Celestina. We are ready to move along. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deb. Let's see here. Maddie, are you still planning on coming in with the assist? Okay, wonderful. Transitioning here myself after chewing on all of those wonderful bright spots as well. So thank you all. Looking forward to continue working together. This morning, we'll kick off some of the content that's a little more in the weeds with some statutory context and direction. So Sean and I will both tackle a couple of different pieces here, but we can just move right along into the House Bill 2001 directive that we have. So many of you all are familiar with this, but I know we have some new faces in the room, at least for this particular rulemaking process, the 24-25 process. So we're just going to recap a little bit here this morning. So from the 2023 bill, the references, those Section 8 and Section 9 references are accordingly. We got various types of direction. We've got principles, we've got what the rules should be about, and then we even have some preliminary priorities. We'll be talking a little bit more about the priorities for this particular work group and honing in really specifically there later in the meeting. But in terms of this high level,
We really are charged with focusing on safe, accessible, affordable housing in communities of our Oregonians' choice, enough equitable housing, a big focus on the housing production strategy as the focal point of local implementation of housing policy. And also an emphasis to support local governments in this work. And that's a big charge of where we're at right now in the process. The Housing Actions Work Group is really focused on that additional layer to the programming that was already developed in 2024 to provide additional support. Fair and equitable outcomes, including environmental justice, climate resilience, and housing opportunity. And a focus that housing should not be undermined by uncertainty or delay, and that local governments should take actions within their control. So again, some of those things have already been encompassed, most of them really, in the 2024 work, but we kind of get to take those principles and continue to apply them as we create this kind of second layer of guidance and support and even compliance pathway in addition to that framing of the programs as they've already been developed. I will go to the next slide, please, Maddie. Again, orienting to sort of where we've been to help look forward. We have that legislative direction. We worked with that last year. And we also wanted to highlight some of the pieces of feedback and discussion that we had in 2024 to help frame how we've ended up with our charge for 2025. So we know that many of you all and other interested parties have interest in discrete compliance pathways, including safe harbors and minimum standards. So the rules that we adopted for the Housing Production Strategy Program in 2024 are complete. You know, a city can go through the Housing Production Strategy Program with those rules, but this interest in a more discrete, clear pathway with less subjectivity and more objectivity is some of the feedback that we've heard throughout the development of those rules. And then there are also some folks who didn't necessarily think that that we needed that, or the details on what that actually looks like are still of mixed opinions across some of the folks on this call and really our interested parties writ large. So that contributed to us noting that more discussion and more sorting out of what that might look like was really needed. Another piece of feedback is that we have outstanding methodological questions about how to pursue this work in a more objective way. How does that actually happen? And what are our methodologies for determining compliance pathways or even providing guidance that we feel good about that's more discrete? And then lastly, just a note about ensuring that we keep pulling the threads through from the Housing Production Strategy Program and the Housing Acceleration Program. So that Housing Production Strategy Program, just a brief recap, is that plan for the actions that a local government will take to promote housing production, affordability, and choice. And the Housing Acceleration Program being that support for if a city is struggling to meet those or get close to those housing production targets that come out of the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis. So trying to make sure that we have as much continuity as we can around what it's like to be in the housing, or to do the housing production strategy work and potentially be in the Housing Acceleration Program, something that we've heard loud and clear. So with the next slide, we can take a look at what, in some ways, a lot of that feedback culminated in, which was that early this month, the Land Conservation and Development Commission, who is slated to adopt the rules for all of our work in 2025 as well, decided to adopt an additional element of the rulemaking charge for this body of work that's spanning 2024 and 2025, and really even some guidance for some portions of the work that will continue into 2026. And that's this charge that is really directive to this work group. So we really wanted to spend time highlighting that today. I'll just read it aloud. Develop a clear compliance pathway for local governments through the housing production strategy and housing acceleration programs, utilizing program design tools like safe harbors or minimum standards in furtherance of affirmatively furthering fair housing, increasing housing production affordability and choice, and reliability in program outcomes for local governments. So as we pursue our discussions, we are charged with thinking about how we want to operationalize that and then bring that to the commission with our reasons and hearty discussion, and then pulling that thread back from Thea's introduction earlier today, using the racial equity framework for decision making to inform that that the commission also adopted for use in this process. Let's see.
We'll do a question and answer at the end, Brock, if you can just make a note. Great. Thank you. Go ahead, Celestina.
Wonderful. Thanks, Deb. With that, I will actually have Sean pop in here and dig in a little bit more, because we have additional focus related to the specific model codes work that we'll be doing in the work group.
Great, yeah, and I know that was a high-level overview, and just Deb, just checking in. Are we saving questions for the end? Because I'm happy to do that too. Okay, great.
Yeah,
All right, all right. So we're going to take a little detour to talk about an element of this work that is part of the broader universe of kind of the general feedback or the general set of kind of adoption-ready actions, program outcomes, the things that Celestina was mentioning. But there are some specific aspects, right? DLCD, we've worked in model codes for a while. We have model codes for ADUs, for middle housing, for climate implementation, for small cities. And as part of this work, as part of the kind of ONA process, as part of HAPL implementation, as part of kind of other efforts, the legislature has said, yeah, model codes, this is great. We have some specific thoughts and direction for you as an agency and how you operationalize these, right? And so as part of that, right, that means essentially model codes are going to be part of our overall body of work that we're doing here. But unlike other adoption-ready actions, which is kind of Celestina mentioned, there's a lot more kind of an open universe of decision-making that happens here. Model codes have parameters that are established around them that we have to kind of work within because the legislature's already weighed in, right? So I'm going to cover that. I'm going to cover the different uses of the model codes, and then ideally some of the opportunities that we have in terms of decision-making relative to those. So if we can move to the next slide. So to kind of provide an overview, there's three major pieces in our three major bills that kind of speak to direction to DLCD, either general or specific direction to develop model codes for the purposes of both implementation of the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, as well as implementation for kind of the Housing Accountability and Production Office, which is why I'm here, right? And so in House Bill 2001, this is the original kind of ONA bill. The intent, or the legislative intent of how model codes were supposed to be used were for both kind of a guidance purpose and also as a regulatory function. And you can see that in different areas of the bill. On the one end, right, model codes are a series of promising practices of how you regulate development to facilitate housing production, affordability, and choice, right? So the idea is, this model code should serve as a resource for like, how do you regulate housing in a way that achieves the kind of goals that we have as a state, right? But they also have a regulatory function in the sense that we have this, housing acceleration program, which we adopted rules for at the end, well, just very recently. And essentially the basic premise of the acceleration program is, all right, state and local governments, we're going to kind of, when we're not meeting our goals, we're going to do an audit. We're going to figure out what's going on. We're going to figure out what's within our respective control to address, and we're going to take those actions, right? Like we're going to enter into an agreement. We're going to figure out what actions do we need to take to address those. And ideally implement those, right? Take actions to facilitate production, affordability, and choice. And at the very tail end of the process, if we've exhausted all the technical assistance, we've exhausted all the resources, and we are not taking actions to facilitate the program goals, there is this model code regulatory function that LCDC, the Land Conservation and Development Commission, has the authority to apply. To the very tail end of the process, the intent is that it's seldom used, and that we, ideally take actions to achieve production, right? So it has this regulatory function. And then in 2024, there was an additional bill that was set up that said, all right, we are going to establish this new Housing Accountability and Production Office. Their goal is implementation of state housing laws. And as part of that work, a big part of their overall function is that they're going to develop model codes by which local governments may comply with housing laws, right? We've done this in other contexts, like for middle housing, we developed a model code that conforms with relevant statutes and administrative rules for how you regulate them. And that would be one of HAPA's ongoing duties. And then finally, we have Senate Bill 1564 that was also adopted in 2024 that gave DLCD specific directions about the types of model codes that we develop. And I'll talk about that in the next slide, but it gave us specific housing types and specific population thresholds that we have to develop model codes for by the end of this year. And it also adds in these kind of other functions. It lets cities adopt these by reference. So if you're a small city, maybe your code is from the 80s, you don't have the resources to fix it, but you really want to allow, say, accessory dwelling units, you have this option that's provided by the state. It's kept, in compliance with housing laws, so you don't need to worry about keeping it updated. You have this option to adopt it by reference in the zones of your choice. So that's a kind of additional function that it has. If we can move to the next slide. So what this means is that, when you take the combined aspects of these statutes together, it essentially means that kind of the types of model codes that we have to develop, at least as kind of a minimum by the end of this year, are fixed, right? The legislature told us this is what we want you to develop. And this is, these are the kind of functions that they serve in the context of Oregon's housing planning program. So that means we, essentially have to produce housing model codes for 4 housing types that are specified in Senate Bill 1564. That is for the detached single unit, for the accessory dwelling unit, for middle housing, and then for multi-unit housing. We also have to do it for 3 categories of city sizes. One for small cities, cities below 2,500. One but for kind of medium-sized cities, cities above 2,500 and below 25,000. And then one for cities of 25,000 population or greater. And then, of course, right, a kind of necessary supplemental module of this is we need model procedures, right? Things like middle housing land division processes, type 1 review, type 2 review, things like that, of like how you actually allow housing, right? It's kind of a necessary, almost like meta code that you would need for this to be functional. And then those model codes have 3 specific statutory functions, one as guidance and promising practice, right? One as kind of optional adoption and application by reference for cities, especially small cities, right? To facilitate production. And then finally, as a regulatory and compliance tool for both the Housing Accountability and Production Office, which will use it as a tool to comply with Oregon's housing laws. And then, of course, also at the tail end of the Housing Acceleration Program is a tool that LCDC can apply, again, at the end of the process there. So with that, we can move to the next slide. What is maybe an opportunity about this direction is that there's a lot of priorities that we're able to establish, right? Celestina kind of covered the major priorities and principles that we need to apply through this process. And what we have the ability to do in this process is, well, what are the priorities that we want to implement through these codes? What are the outcomes that we want to see, right? We've heard these already in rulemaking over the past year, things like incentivizing accessibility and design, emphasizing affordability, thinking about project feasibility. There's a lot of examples of different priorities that have been articulated so far that we can, right, implement through these model codes. And of course, ideally too, these are going to build over time, right? We know that there's going to be other modules that are added to this to help local governments with the implementation of things like I guess an example would be the mandatory adjustments provision of Senate Bill 1537, just to throw an example out there off the top of my head. And then ideally too, we are an agency that works a lot in model codes, so we have a lot of existing work already that we can draw from and synergize or align with. Things like the Small Cities Model Code, the CFAC Walkability Code, the Manufactured and Prefabricated Model Code. And then, of course, we also have an ADU model code. We have a middle housing model code that exists already. So we have this huge body of pre-existing work that we can draw from as kind of a starting place and align with to ensure that we are kind of consistently as an agency achieving the overall goals that we're trying to do, and to, obviously not try to reinvent the wheel over and over again, but to draw from existing work and of course use, public dollars efficiently, right? So with that in mind, that's just kind of a basic overview of the model codes. The best way to think of them is this kind of like a prescribed set of adoption ready actions where we have some opportunity to kind of, implement specific priorities through. And I think with that, this next slide, I'm gonna pass it back over to Celestina. I don't think I developed this one. Right? Detour is over.
Thanks, Sean. An important detour. So just to try and pull all of that together a little bit, and also start to get specific on exactly what is included in this work, although we'll continue to unpack that. And you had the work plan in the materials for this meeting, but we're pulling some of the work that was referenced and outlined in the Needs and Production and Housing Acceleration technical advisory committees and pulling it forward into the scope of work for the Housing Actions Work Group this year. The pieces that we've highlighted there are the adoption ready actions is what we're calling them right now, policy options, tools and resources, but collectively the adoption ready actions that Sean was mentioning, model codes being one of them. With the under the direction of affirmatively furthering fair housing. So that was, like Sean was mentioning, some of those priorities or those outcomes that we're looking for that we'll also talk a little bit more about later. And then from the housing acceleration side, this goal of creating tools and incentives for meaningful action to address barriers. And that's that connection between the Housing Production Strategy Program and the Housing Acceleration Program, making sure that any adoption-ready actions that we build out have a relationship and some continuity about how cities navigate all of this work across those two programs. And that is further developed by having compliance pathways through the program. So not only having these adoption-ready actions available for use, but thinking a little bit more about how they operate and about how the programs could offer this more objective pathway to compliance. And then lastly, we have the development of guidance materials. So the two focus items there are the development of a guidebook to do Goal 10 planning work under the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, and a revamp of the Housing Production Strategy menu of actions, as we've been calling it for a little while here. And that is a PDF that currently lives online that some of you are familiar with that tries to cover quite a few, I think it's over 100 actions that a local government can take to further housing production, affordability, and choice. And that was developed as the Housing Production Strategy Program was initially rolled out, and is ready for a little bit of a reboot, for a refresh, looking at the actions, the organization, making it as useful as possible, ideally even creating an interactive tool. So we know that there are guidance materials that would support all of this work, that would support the adoption ready action use, that would support even understanding the compliance pathways that emerge from this work group. That being said, because it's guidance on these programs, there's a little bit of a dependency in our timeline here. So we will be ticking away kind of in the background on queuing up to develop those guidance materials, but they won't be the focus of our time, because we'll want to flesh out some of these other pieces and make sure that our guidance materials are responsive to where those first two items and focuses of the work group land. So guidance would largely be the end, or at least the second half. We'll start to dig in there heavier in 2025. I think with that, we can pause for questions.
Yeah, and the next agenda item too, we'll get a little more detail about the work of this work group in the coming year. But any other questions about statutory overview or the sort of big picture of what we're doing here? Brock, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Deb. Just a couple of clarifications. One, so regarding the amended rulemaking charge, the language there does say develop, and Commissioner Lazo, since you're on the meeting with us, please correct me if I'm wrong. But when this was adopted by the commission, this change to the charge, as Commissioner Lazo had stated, as well as Commissioners Thompson and Warren, the intent was to explore adoption of these in rule, not to guarantee adoption of them in rule. And so I just want to make it clear that while the language says develop, it is an exploration of tools tools that could be developed for that purpose. The other one that I just want to add a little clarification on regarding model ordinances or models generally. When we have impose appropriate models, that is in response to city non-compliance. That's under section 17 of House Bill 2001. That is not a directive on the front end to say, hey, here's a code that you have to adopt in your HPS. So just two clarifications. Hopefully it didn't take too much time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Brock. Any other questions about the big picture? Yeah, go ahead, Samuel.
No, it's obviously still very early in the housing production strategy process, but since that initial list of recommended actions has been out there for a couple of years, I'm wondering if there's any kind of initial data on what's working. I'm sure that none of those recommendations are housing production in any way, but I'm wondering if you have enough information to go on to say, like, oh, maybe we should put more emphasis on this or build this out more, that you'll be able to present to us.
And I think you are, for language we're using here, the HPS menu is what you're referring to, that sort of laundry list of actions. I don't know if we want to add that to the list of questions to be queried, or if you have initial thoughts, Celestina or Sean or Madi.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's an easy one. We every year at the beginning of the year, that staff is charged with giving an update to the commission on the housing production strategy program. And I believe, I'll have to double check, but I believe that early in 2024 that included a review of which actions from the menu were being used and kind of what the relationship to the menu was in the first year of HPSs, which at that point is all we had. And the short answer is that it's a mixed bag. Even the function of matching the action a city is selecting with the action that's in the menu. Sometimes the actions in the menu are very specific in their application. So the short answer is I don't know that we are quite at a point either in having enough HPSs or having the database reflect the actions. Like there are a number of variables in there to draw any clear determinations, but that information about the database and which actions have been used and noted is definitely something we can continue to release on an annual basis and dig into more when we get to the guidance material.
Thank you. Go ahead, Michael.
I just felt the need to flag that Brock and I have a different reading of the statute, but I won't get into it any further.
All right, fair enough. Alan, yeah.
Thanks, Deb. And I just wanted to respond to what Brock had said, and I think bring the perspective for me, and I think other commissioners in passing the charge. I think that the sense is that we do need to do something out of this work group. We need to come up with something, and I think what we want to make sure is that we get it right in the end, and that the charge doesn't lock us into a certain mix of things, but the outcome is that we get it right, that serves both the needs of compliance and flexibility and surety for jurisdictions. And so that mix is, as you can imagine, a tough mix to figure out, but that's our charge over the next year. And I think that was the sense the commission had, was that yeah, we need to provide some tools, we need to create some tools, but we don't know what that mix looks like yet, and so it's hard to put names to them right now. But certainly we actions in this work group is where we're headed, and that will be the outcome.
Thanks, Alan. Really appreciate the clarification on that and some additional thinking. And I'm sure this will evolve as we all work through this together as well. Shannon, questions or clarifications? And before you speak, sorry, after Shannon, I'm going to go ahead and move us on to the next agenda item. But Shannon, please go ahead.
Thanks. I really appreciate this overview. And going back a little bit to the model code discussion that Sean shared, SB 1564, the optional application by reference, it doesn't have to be today. I guess I'm just really curious to better understand, I guess, what I would call the scale. Like, could this be Yeah, I'd like to better understand the scale. So is this for something like citing permanently supportive housing, or is it very specific? Is it meant to be more broad? I'm just trying to get my head around it if possible. Thank you.
Yeah, Shannon, I can answer that. So it is pretty specific about what we are supposed to produce by the end of the year. It gives us 4 specific housing types. It gives us 3 city population like threshold categories. There's also, for it to be functional, you also need to have procedures. So like, how do you regulate a housing type at the counter? And so all of those components are kind of necessary. So that's kind of like the basic, like, this is our box of the things that we have to produce kind of at a minimum. And then anything kind of above and beyond that as part of the adoption ready actions process, right? Like, the idea is we have resources and we have priorities, and let's apply those resources to achieve our priorities to the best of our ability, right? And that's kind of the conversation of like, well, what actions do we want those to be? What do we want to develop out and spend our time and energy doing, right? So if you move to the next slide, you can see this box that shows the different housing types versus the different population thresholds. And then also there's that meta model procedures code that's kind of a module that's added to this. This is like what we have to produce under statute, right? Like, it's kind of like our assignment that the legislature has given us.
Thank you. And if I may, just quickly for my own brain, I mean, could there be some worlds in which, like, actually ADUs could be the same for cities under 2,500 and up to 25,000? Like, would they necessarily be different in those different population size communities?
Not necessarily, but one of our charges is to consider the kind of differences between communities, both on like, size, their geographic location, things like that. So we have to, think about that. Like, where does it make sense? Maybe in the context of an ADU, there might not be that much of a difference between, say, a smaller city and a larger city. I don't know. That's kind of part of our discussion, right? So that's where we can kind of hash this out a little bit more.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you both for that edification. So let's move along and try to get us back on track a little bit. HOG overview, which Celestina sort of started, but with the last slide. And I can't recall, maybe Celestina, you're taking this, or Mari?
This one is me, Deb. So thank you.
Mari.
I am going to provide an overview in the next few slides of how the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis rulemaking process is structured, and specifically how this Housing Actions Work Group, or the HOG, fits into this process. For the information that I will provide is going to be probably already known for the folks who have been part of the rulemaking process since the beginning of the work when this started around this time last year. But nonetheless, it is important to revisit the information so our new members are up to speed. We're all kind of grounded and have an established shared baseline for the rulemaking process, and can work from the same place. So throughout this meeting today, you've heard already about guiding principles, statutory direction, the commission, the RAC, and more. And this slide in front of you here is a diagram that outlines, that we put together, that outlines how all of these pieces fit together and explains how this particular group, along with DLCD staff, are going to make decisions during the rulemaking process. So quickly, just what is the rulemaking process? At its core, it is a process led by state agencies to operationalize state legislation and regulation that sets forth direction, and state agencies fill in the gaps by developing implementation details. So that is what we are doing as part of the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis rulemaking process. So who does what? We've heard from Alan Lazo, who's on the commission, the Land Conservation Development Commission for the departments, for the DLCD. The commission directs DLCD staff to develop rule recommendations. And at the end of the day, LCDC is the final decision maker in the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis rulemaking process. We saw this for the folks who have been with us since the beginning of 2023. We saw the first phase of the rules that were adopted just a couple weeks ago, adopted by the commission. So that's just a great example of kind of this particular piece where we went through this process, and at the end of the day, LCDC, Land Conservation Development Commission, had the final say on adopting the rules. To get to that point, though, DLCD staff, or us, many of us here, worked to draft rules and recommendations informed by discussions with advisory bodies. So this particular work group, the Housing Actions Work Group, is an advisory body that we have added to the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis. And together, beginning in 2025, we're going to dive deep into discussions on policy and technical questions related to the work that Celestina and Sean laid out. And ultimately, where your work with us will help us get to a set of deliverables at the end of the day, which you heard from Celestina and Sean already. It was included in your work plan as part of the meeting materials. And included in that is a potential for rule adoption by the end of the year. So it is important to note that with LCDC having the final decision of what comes out of our work group at the end of the day, I want to emphasize we're shaping it together collectively. The work, the meetings that we're going to have, and the work that we're undertaking shapes the what we bring forward at the end of the day. And as part of that process, staff will be updating LCDC throughout 2025 and bringing them along in our discussions. Commissioner Lazo here is part of our work group, and as many of you all saw, he was also part of the Needs and Production Technical Advisory Committee in the first part of the owner rulemaking process, and was able to bring his lens and his experience from being the liaison in that particular tack forward to those updates in those commission meeting updates where staff came to the commission. So that will continue throughout 2025, and part of that will also include opportunities for the public, and you all included, to directly provide feedback to the commission and bring your feedback forward directly to the commission. So many arrows on this diagram. This process is iterative. It's very collaborative, and we'll do our best effort. Staff will do our best to address the issues and questions you raise, whether it's policy related or technical. Your input is critical in helping us navigate the complexities that is part of our work, and work through the sticky elements of the process. So with that, I'm going to move us along to overview and ensure that we all have a good understanding what the roles and responsibilities are between our work group and the Rules Advisory Committee. And maybe I should go back one slide first. Here on the leftmost side in blue is outlined the Rules Advisory Committee. So we established this Rules Advisory Committee. It's a membership of over 40 members, and they're kind of, they've been with us since the beginning of 2023. They'll continue to do this work or be with us as part of the owner rulemaking process. And the Housing Actions Work Group, along with the remaining Technical Advisory Committee group that was established at the beginning of the process, or the Capacity and Urbanization TAC, together we'll work in this collaborative process between the RAC and the work group and TAC to ultimately work through the work ahead and get to the end of 2025. So that brings me to this slide, which is how our role, what our role is on the Housing Actions Work Group and what the role is for the Rules Advisory Committee. This slide has a lot of words on it, and many of them are pretty distinct or pretty similar, with a particular distinction about how our roles are a little bit different. And I'll focus on that, being that the RAC has been set up to kind of focus on broader policy direction and guidance, whereas the HOG and the CalTAC, we're focused on technical and implementation elements. So really what that means is getting to the nuts and bolts of the work. And so we'll work with the RAC. So the work that is that we do will speak to the RAC and vice versa. That is kind of the iterative process that the diagram in the previous slide tried to show. And I want to now move us into just a quick note about why the structure. I'm realizing I jumped ahead, so I'm going to go back. Why did we set up this structure between the RAC and the HOG or the CalTAC or the Needs and Production or the Housing Accountability Technical Advisory Committee from this year's first phase of the ONA? And that being is, so Athena and Sean laid out kind of the statutory direction that we received as part of the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis. So really primarily House Bill 2001, essentially tasking the group here on the DLCD side and the folks who have been with us since the beginning of the ONA rulemaking process with reforming Goal 10 and Goal 14 processes. These are processes that were established just roughly over 50 years ago. There's lots of work that we have to collectively do as part of this Oregon Housing Needs Analysis rulemaking. And so last year we took a major step forward with many of your help here, resulting in the adoption of the first set of ONA rules. Kudos moment again. Thank you for that work and that achievement. But we're not complete. We're moving into 2025. We're going to continue to tackle the remaining areas of the ONA rulemaking charge, as was noted earlier. And so combining both policy direction and the technical implementation into one advisory committee would have been a lot for one body to handle. And so organizing ourselves with the RAC and the work groups, with this work group and the tax, felt like the best way to kind of manage the tall charge and order that we have as part of the ONA rulemaking process. So our work here is complementary to the RAC and will continue to play a critical role to ensuring that we achieve the goals that we've been tasked to do as part of the scope of the Housing Actions Work Group. So now I'm going to move us into kind of some responsibilities and expectation setting of this work group. That's what is outlined here on your slide. And it's so that we all are having a baseline expectation for how we can work together effectively and respectively to meet our charge and our work ahead as part of this rulemaking process. So first, I'd like to begin by kind of noting expectations of you all as HOG members, which is to really approach the space in good faith. This means being open to learning and understanding the perspectives of others, even when they differ from your own, and engaging with respect and professionalism. We share this space, so it's important to be thoughtful listeners and offer constructive dialogue to ensure that we're, walking in the direction that we should be walking and achieving our goals and having a successful process along the way. And to achieve the best possible outcomes, it is essential that everyone comes prepared. So this includes, so we do have an expectation that as you come into the Housing Actions Work Group, you are reviewing all materials that are sent to you all ahead of the meeting. that is on us for us to send you the materials. But once we come to the meetings, we do expect that y'all dive into the work that that's included in the agenda, the packet, so that we can advance our discussions and have meaningful participation and your willingness to collaborate on this work. That said, at any point in time, I do want to note that if you need assistance, please raise your hand. We've got a crew of DLCD staff at the ready to support you. So please do not hesitate to ask. Any one of us will be here to support you as you need. And to ensure that you're feeling comfortable, you're feeling informed, and you're feeling equipped to contribute meaningfully to the discussions. Then we have some ground rules. We've established some ground rules to guide our interactions. These ground rules will play a vital role to ensuring that our space feels welcoming, inclusive, and that everyone feels valued and brave to contribute. So I'm going to take a moment to read these aloud, the ground rules, so that we have these in our minds, beginning with the first one: honor the agenda and stay on topic. Speak one at a time. Allow for a balance of speaking time. Raise items for discussion early and often. Address issues and questions, not individuals. Avoid personal attacks. Listen with respect. Avoid side conversations. So these rules are not a formality. They're essential to ensuring that we're fostering a collaborative, inclusive environment, as noted, so that all voices can be heard. And then we also have some complementary to these ground rules. We also have process suggestions to guide our work together. And they're here on the screen. I won't read those to you, but I do want to highlight the last one, which I think is critical and important to kind of take a moment to highlight, which is the specific process suggestion around holding us, the DLCD team and the project team, and then even this collective group accountable to the legislative intent and the principles that both Sean and Celestina outlined earlier. Please use those to refer back to. I know the DLCD team did so back as part of the first phase of the owner rulemaking process, because they serve as a good compass or a North Star in ensuring that the rules and the deliverables that we are charged with to produce stay true to the legislative goals and the intent that we've been tasked to implement and work on. So definitely important for us to lean on those principles at any point in time if we just want to remind ourselves, or if we feel like we've deviated and we want to come back to our work. Those are good places to begin to reground us. I believe this is my last slide, and it's about timeline. So with that foundation in place about our roles, our responsibilities, our expectations, I do want to take a moment to address kind of our scope that you've already been hearing about, that was noted in your work plan, in your meeting materials. But just a moment for us to ensure that we're all tracking our timeline. And the timeline here on this slide provides you a high-level view of the overall rulemaking process since we began back last year in 2023. But now we're midway into this process. As many of you know, and for the new folks, you've been hearing, we did adopt rules a couple weeks ago, so that we're in the middle of the rulemaking process. And so I want to draw your attention to the red box on this slide and the accompanying bullet list. This is our time and timeline ahead, and this is our work that we have to focus on. And simply put, our scope is ambitious. I'll be direct and honest about that, and our timeline is tight. By the end of 2025, we are aiming to complete several major deliverables that you've been hearing about, but I'll note them again. We are developing a library of adoption-ready actions, including model codes, which Sean spoke to. We are developing guiding materials that includes a guidebook, a Goal 10 guidebook for local jurisdictions to use as they're working through their housing production strategy, their housing capacity analysis, housing planning generally. And then we are revamping the existing menu of actions for the housing production strategy program. And then finally, we are exploring the development of rules that outline clear compliance pathways for both the housing production strategy and the housing acceleration program. With please, so you have your work plan included in the meeting materials. At the short of it is that the plan targets draft concepts and outlines of all of the deliverables that I just noted by June of 2025. So we've got the next 6 months to get to a draft point. And then from there, we are pivoting into final drafts and final rules for adoption by December 2025, based on how we function and how we work through the charge ahead. In order to meet this timeline, we've so that's how we've kind of thought about in terms of the deliverables and to get to the finals is to get to drafts by June 2025. We anticipate that we will be holding at least 2 meetings each month starting in January. One meeting will be longer than the other, with the longer meeting being 3 hours and the shorter meeting being 2 hours. And roughly we're looking at Wednesdays, continuing to be on this Wednesday cadence for our meetings. So that is, it's a heavy commitment that you all are a part of, and thank you again for being part of that. I'll note that the shorter meeting, we are, because I know it's a big commitment to offer to us that many hours every month. The shorter meeting of about 2 hours will be optional. We intend to organize the longer meeting such that it is a discussion and focus on the adoption-ready actions, with the shorter meeting being on a more focused discussion on pieces as they come. So it really is about if there is a technical moment that is narrow and specific, we might use the shorter meeting for the folks who have an interest and a really strong connection to that potential topic area to come and join us and get in the weeds with us on those particular issues. Please stay tuned for meeting invitations in the next couple of weeks from the DLCD team. Specifically, they will be coming in from Ingrid Caudell, who's on the line, for the meeting invitations. I think I have a couple last notes, which is the RAC is currently on break due to the legislative session. So we had their last RAC meeting of 2024 just last week, I believe. They'll reconvene in early April. This means that until then, we are meeting and working intensely in the interim and preparing ourselves to have that collaborative back and forth that I talked about in the diagram slide a few slides ago, but also kind of replicating the same kind of process that we took in 2023 or 2024. Goodness, I'm like, my timeline is off. As you can see, I'm ready for 2025. But with that, I know the scope of work is significant. The timeline is pretty tight. However, just a final kind of closing remark on my part for these slides is just much appreciation for your commitment to this Housing Actions Work Group, the collaboration, your expertise. And I am confident that we'll be able to develop thoughtful and actionable solutions to meet our shared goals and continue to run that list of the bright spots that we started at the top of the meeting going forward. So with that, let's take a moment for clarifications and questions, and I'll turn this meeting back to you, Deb.
Great. Thanks so much, Madi. Just a couple of housekeeping items real quick here. We have about 25, a little less than 25 minutes left in the meeting. I really want to make sure we reserve enough time for the policy objectives conversation. So let's do a couple of questions, clarifications, and I'll just remind you, I'm going to follow up with each of you individually. So if there's like detailed process questions or anything else you need some information about, we can also connect you with Madi. We can sort of find ways. And staff said they'd be happy to circulate or post the PowerPoint presentation from today, so you'll have those details to refer back. So sorry to put us in the pinch here, but let's take a couple of questions and then just know we have some other resources. So please, Brock, go ahead.
Just very quickly, as much as we can avoid scheduling the meetings that overlap with legislative committee hearings would be fantastic. I'm sure many of our stakeholders feel the same way. So thank you.
Yes, and there's so many legislative committee hearings, but we will definitely be doing our best to work on that. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Brock. We'll do our best. Can't promise it all, but we will do our best. So thank you.
And again, when there are those conflicts, let's keep the line of communication open to figure out other ways to make sure we're getting your needs and perspectives on the table. Anyone else have questions about the work of this work group or the process ahead? Yeah, go ahead, Kathy.
I think it would be awesome if we could collect everybody's bright spots and put them together so we have them to reference, because we're seeing things happening in different areas and we in Portland don't see all that many of them. So if we could have them to point to and be encouraged by, that would be great, because we spent a lot of the RAC meeting or toward the end of the RAC meeting talking about the barriers and how difficult it was going to be to build especially low-income affordable housing, and the NIMBY process, the NIMBY reaction. So I think it would be great to just know what's been happening and have that to refer to.
I like that, Kathy, and I'm not averse to thinking about adding to that list as we go along. I think it is really easy to fall into the trap of getting dragged down in the barriers and all of the negative pressures we feel that we're all trying to solve here. And really important to remember the progress we're making along the way. It's hard to see on a day-to-day basis sometimes. So I like that. Thank you. So I'm going to move us along to the last item, and we'll do a little bit of a recap at the end. And I want to leave about, I don't know, at least 3 minutes for that, but 5 would be good. So we have about 15 minutes here. So I'm going to just cut to the quick. Madi, terrible analogy. Madi, could you pull up the slide on policy objectives, please? So this is getting into the content of things, really setting us up for the conversation in January. That'll really kick off in January, specific to some of the housing actions related items for safe harbors and minimum requirements. So the state has drafted up, sort of pulling together the needs of what needs to move forward here for our work in 2025. The state has drafted up some high-level objectives for this group to help us understand the options and sort of work through the details of how one could go about developing either safe harbors or minimum requirements. And again, for those of you not super familiar with the terms of safe harbors, especially, it's something a city could do that sort of absolves them of some of their compliance requirements, or doesn't absolve them, sorry, makes it clear that if they do these things that are safe harbors, they can continue on in their process. And this is specifically true or applicable to the housing production strategy work. And so we'll get into this more as we move along, but for today, we'd like to just recap these policy objectives for you. In your agenda, there is a link to a much more detail under each of these 4 points. And I'm gonna just, I think I'd already, yep. So I just put the link in the chat in case you don't have your agenda in front of you. And we'd like to just hear from you about your thoughts generally on these 4 objectives, questions or additions you have, questions about the objectives or any of the sort of details, anything needing clarification, and especially as you're sort of thinking about the racial equity framework that Thea recapped at the beginning and the legislative direction that Sean recapped in the presentation. Is there anything else within these 4 objectives that you'd like us to continue to consider? So the 4 objectives, again, the link has the sort of sub-bullets which provide the real rich detail, but promote inclusive zoning to enable a diversity of housing options, produce and retrofit homes in high opportunity areas that increase housing choice related to key equity-driven needs, streamline housing development processes, and increase community capacity and resilience in support of equitable housing production. These being the sort of big 4 objectives that need to be solved for as we're working through safe harbor and minimum requirement conversations next year. So thoughts or questions? Shannon, go ahead.
Thank you. It might be alluded to here, but I'd love to be a bit more explicit about adopt strategies designed to expedite production of affordable homes. I'm thinking of the new middle income revolving loan fund, right? Like, wouldn't it be great to have a model ordinance so that cities can just say, yep, we want to participate without like a ton of city council meetings. Another thing that has come up in some spaces are deferring SDCs until the end of the construction cycle prior to occupancy or sale. Just really explicit about do the things that help get the homes built. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam, questions, thoughts?
I love the objectives. I was actually going to ask this earlier. In terms of the categories of cities, should we be thinking of metro cities over 1,000 in the large city category, and I guess now Tillamook cities as well, during this work?
Good question.
Sam, is this for model code purposes?
For model code purposes, I mean, I guess for any of these, yeah, any of the work.
Yeah, it's kind of a good question. I guess it depends. So I would say for the purposes of model code, cities above 10,000 in population has a specific definition in statute, so that might be applicable there. But I mean, cities above 1,000 in the metro region, that was narrowly tailored to just middle housing implementation. So that might not be the same. That might not fall in the same boat.
And I can imagine too, Sam, and I'll let other staff answer if they see differently, but I could imagine that being part of our conversation along the way, sort of, as safe harbor ideas and the sort of how is being developed. We could definitely be talking about, are there certain characteristics of cities, whether that size or something else, that different safe harbors or minimum standards are best suited for, or how they could be adjusted. And I'm looking to my colleagues at the state. Go ahead, Ethan.
Hi, Deb, and hi, everyone. Yeah, I think when we're thinking about this work, particularly related to this work group and the scope of their work, we're really talking about implementation of Goal 10 through the housing production strategy work. And so when we're talking about like requirements and safe harbors, those kind of things serve that purpose of conducting a housing production strategy and informing the process of the housing acceleration program. That doesn't mean that those things are only useful in that context. I think there are other opportunities for, those requirements or safe harbors or building out that menu of housing production strategies that could be used in other jurisdictions across the state. But when we're talking about like compliance to what or with what, it's compliance with the housing production strategy program, which only sub jurisdictions are required to enter through.
Thanks, Ethan. Michael, go ahead.
Thanks. I really like that starter list as well. The one thing that I thought maybe it would be worth trying to find a word or two for is location. I didn't see that explicitly reflected. It seems to me that that's fundamental to fair housing calculations. That was my only reaction.
I think there is sort of under the promote, there might be others. The one that jumps out under the first one, promote inclusive zoning to enable diversity. There's that housing locations and high opportunity areas. Maybe that's
it's implicit, right? Yeah.
Okay. But we can definitely review and see if there are other opportunities for that. Thank you. Alan.
So I've got a kind of question, or maybe to surface something around accessible housing that's new. So I am looking at the low-income housing tax credit qualified allocation plan, and universal design is now not just a tiebreaker, but used for evaluating LIHTC. It's very difficult to objectively create standards for universal design. And if in any place we're able to start thinking about this, this seems to be the place to do it now. I think there's already some concern from the broader CDC kind of community that operationalizing universal design is really difficult. And even our experts within our community in accessible housing would agree that it's hard to really put standards to that. So I think we need to do some thinking around that topic.
That sounds good. Let's keep talking about that, and we'll keep reviewing that as well. Thank you. Daisy.
Yeah, I just had a question about number 4. Number 4, I'm just not sure what it means. It sounds a little nebulous to me the way it's written, so it'd be great to hear just what that means to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, as staff are queuing up to help here, increase community capacity and resilience in support of equitable housing production. And then there's some examples that come with that. Madi, might you be able to help clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm actually going to see if Sean wants to weigh in here on this particular one.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, and this was, one of the themes in the housing acceleration kind of conversations is this real importance of like, I guess the analogy is like, when you're on a plane, you put your mask on before helping others. And this is in the context of like, in order to actually do this work, you have to have people, you have to have capacity, you have to have funding, right? Like you have to have these different pieces that if they're just not in place, nothing's going to happen, right? And so I think what this is intending to speak to is that we're thinking about this systemically, right? Like we care about making sure that we actually have enough resources to do this work and that our communities are building in a resilient way, right? Like it doesn't make sense to like, for example, build housing in places where it's at risk of being destroyed, right? That type of thing. And so like, that's essentially the basic theme of this, is that we're thinking about this underlying, well, let's make sure that we have the actual ability to make sure our communities are able to respond to housing production needs.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Maybe I think just kind of a general theme I'm hearing is making some things a little bit more explicit, but that was really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or reflections on the 4 policy objectives? This will be our sort of North Star guidebook. Well, we're having a guidebook. I don't want to mess up terms here, but sort of the thing we keep referring back to as we're working through this and thinking through how we're getting at these objectives. So now is an important time to weigh in. Yeah, Mary Kyle.
Thanks. The section at the end, priority tools, seems a little short. Is this something we can be adding to?
Any thoughts there? I guess maybe I'll turn it back. Oh, go ahead, Bia.
Oh, I'm happy to jump in. Yes, Mary Kyle, this is sort of just like the stub of a longer conversation. We considered whether we even wanted to include it, but I think it starts to encourage us to think through tools that can be applied to these priorities and objectives.
Good. Okay. Thanks.
Brock, additional thoughts or ideas?
Yeah, so I was just going to note, I think that those kind of 2 bullets and the 2 sub bullets are just good points that it seems to me, given my understanding of everyone's positions here, that everyone would be in general agreement with, but certainly doesn't mean that it can't be expanded.
You're speaking about the priority tools. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The incentives, displacement mitigation preference. Great. Anything else? This is a starting place of the conversation as mentioned, and in January, we'll be digging into sort of how we go about matching up some options for compliance with these 4 objectives in mind and the tools of minimum requirements and safe harbors. So more to come and as we dig through these, but I really appreciate your thoughts and ideas about how to strengthen these. So with that, I think we are at the conclusion of our meeting here. Just want to take a moment. We had quite a bit of discussion at the beginning. Well, not discussion, but sort of ideas about bright spots at the beginning. We sort of lined you out for most of the meeting, and then we had this short discussion at the end. And I'm saying all this because typically this is the time when we reflect back on our conversations and think about how well we did or didn't do on addressing the principles of racial equity and some of the other drivers for production, affordability, and choice. We didn't have as much opportunity to do that, but I still think it's worth checking in to see any thoughts or anyone has on the racial equity framework or the conversation today generally. Okay, we'll flex that muscle more in the future for sure. And we try to really use that as a time to reflect back and learn and maybe come to the next conversation, hitting those issues that we missed a little harder. I did hear some bright spots about the elevation of conversations around disability being something that some of you have not experienced heretofore, and I hope that we continue along that path as well. Okay, so looking ahead, Mari mentioned we'll be in touch. Well, Ingrid will be in touch. We're aiming for by the end of the year to get you the series of meetings on the schedule. Generally, we're aiming for Wednesday mornings about this time, but those might adjust for a variety of reasons. And it won't be every week. It'll be a couple times a month. Brock, thank you for mentioning, and I saw nodding heads of trying to see what we can do to avoid at least the most sort of relevant or sort of crossover legislative committee hearings as best we can, and then we'll find other tools for getting feedback from you all who have to step out for other meetings and can't make these. So more to come on all of that and all the detail of meetings to come. So we'll be in touch with that. We'll be in touch also with the presentation from today. And then I personally will be in touch with each of you individually to set up some time for a short conversation and just talk to you a little bit and make sure we have everything you need and we can chat through any of the details of the information you received today. Anything else, team, that you'd like to say or that I missed?
I'll just say thank you all for sticking with us for 2 hours and, kind of grounding us in some of the work that we were already we were directed to do, and just allowing us to think to level set on some of the expectations, our roles, and our responsibilities. So appreciate you all, and yeah, we're looking forward to the work ahead. Stay tuned for more, and we're going to dive in deep. So buckle up. As we get into 2025. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you all. Have a great new year.